It was that chemistry that kept the show going for 10 seasons.
Joey, what would you do if you were omnipotent?
30 years of reruns, merchandise, and trivia nights have made people feel like they already know everything about Friends. The cast chemistry, the coffee shop, the couch, the decade-long romance. But the actual story of how this show came to exist, who nearly destroyed it before a single episode aired, and what the 6 people at the center carried in silence for a decade, that story has been hiding in plain sight. Every fact that follows comes directly from creator confessions, verified cast interviews, and documented behind-the-scenes accounts. Before Friends had a cast, a network deal, or even a name, creators David Crane and Marta Kauffman walked into NBC with a 7-page concept called Insomnia Cafe. The central romance wasn't Ross and Rachel, it was Joey and Monica. Those 2 characters were the emotional core, the will-they, won't-they couple everything else was supposed to orbit around. After NBC bought the pilot, the title shifted to Friends Like Us, then Across the Hall, then 6 of 1, until it became simply Friends, and the Joey-Monica love story had been replaced by something discovered in the casting room rather than the writer's room. NBC's executives weren't convinced the format would sustain an audience. 6 people in their 20s sharing apartments didn't feel like enough cross-generational appeal. The writers created a character called Pat the Cop, an older presence intended to balance the younger ensemble. Crane and Kaufman fought to have the character cut entirely, arguing that the chemistry between the 6 friends was the entire point, and NBC eventually relented. A 7th character, a police officer wandering through Monica's apartment offering life perspective, came within genuine distance of being part of this show. What happened in the casting room rewrote the show completely. Courtney Cox walked into her audition as the most recognizable name in the building. She'd appeared in Bruce Springsteen's Dancing in the Dark music video, had roles in Family Ties and Seinfeld, and everyone expected her to read for Rachel. Cox asked to read for Monica instead, and casting director Ellie Cantor's reaction was immediate. They knew she had to be Monica. The original version had been written with actress Janine Goff specifically in mind. Cox walked in, brought something entirely different, and the personality of Monica Geller shifted in a single audition. Chandler Bing's casting played out like a storyline the show might have written. John Cryer, who would later anchor 2.5 Men, recorded his audition tape in London, packaged it carefully, and shipped it to Los Angeles. And the tape got held at customs. By the time it cleared, Chandler had already been cast. An international shipping delay may have cost Cryer one of the most iconic roles in television history. Jon Favreau also auditioned for Chandler, as did Craig Bierko, considered a genuine frontrunner. Perry had actually helped coach Bierko before Bierko chose to pass on the role and join a pilot called Best Friends, which never went anywhere. Perry was simultaneously being released from a commitment to LAX 2194, a show about baggage handlers at an airport who sorted the luggage of extraterrestrial travelers. That was the project Matthew Perry almost spent his career on instead of Friends. David Schwimmer was the only cast member whose character had been written specifically for him, and he still initially said no, unwilling to return to sitcom work. He signed on only after learning the role had been created with him in mind. Eric McCormick auditioned multiple times for Ross and came very close to getting it. For Joey, Hank Azaria, the voice behind much of the Simpsons ensemble, auditioned multiple times and was given serious consideration. Vince Vaughn also read for Joey before Matt LeBlanc walked in. LeBlanc had $11 in his bank account and had been looking into taking a second job in food service just to keep himself afloat. The salaries those 6 eventually earned reshaped how actors in Hollywood negotiate. When Friends premiered in 1994, each cast member earned roughly $22,000 per episode. By season 2, the pay began to diverge, and that's when all 6 made a decision studios hadn't encountered before. They would negotiate as a single unit, or not at all. Warner Brothers wanted individual contracts. The cast refused. Equal pay across the board or nobody negotiated. By season 3, Each earned $75,000 per episode. Seasons 7 and 8 reached $750,000 each, and the final 2 seasons paid every one of them $1 million per episode. The series finale drew 52.5 million viewers, the 4th most watched television episode in American history at that time, and a 30-second commercial sold for $2 million, the highest advertising rate a sitcom had ever commanded. Ensemble casts on Modern Family and The Big Bang Theory later used the same collective model. Matthew Perry's story belongs here as the actual account of what was happening behind the performance millions watched every week. Perry battled addiction to prescription painkillers and alcohol for much of the show's run, entered rehabilitation more than 12 times throughout his life, and spent an estimated $9 million trying to get sober. In an interview with BBC's Chris Evans, he said he had no memory of 3 full years of the show, somewhere between seasons 3 and 6, roughly 70 episodes, and the man at the center of its comedic voice had no recollection of making them. None of it was publicly acknowledged during the run. His castmates stood by him without public comment. The production kept moving. America kept laughing at Chandler Bing's perfectly calibrated sarcasm without knowing what it cost. Perry published his memoir, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, in 2022, including a long-standing crush on Jennifer Aniston he'd held quietly from before filming began. He passed away on October 28, 2023, at 54 years old. Jennifer Aniston was the last of the 6 to sign for the 10th and final season, and she came genuinely close to not returning. Her film career had separated her from the rest of the cast in terms of available options, and she wrestled with a real concern about legacy, whether ending the show at its peak was better than risking a final season that diminished everything. She signed. The finale was filmed. 52.5 million people watched Rachel get off the plane. Every frame of New York in that show was built on a soundstage in Burbank, California. The fountain from the opening credits wasn't in Central Park. It sat on the Warner Brothers lot. Each 22-minute episode took approximately 6 hours to film, about twice the standard length for a sitcom taping, because of multiple retakes and real-time script rewrites. Lisa Kudrow didn't know how to play guitar when she was cast. Her instructors taught her to play in a way that sounded deliberately wrong. The bad guitar-playing audiences laughed at for a decade was a crafted performance embedded within the performance. When Courtney Cox became pregnant near the end of the series, the writers faced a structural problem. They had already established that Monica and Chandler couldn't have children naturally, so the production concealed her condition entirely using costumes, careful camera placement, and strategic props. When Kudrow became pregnant during an earlier season, the writers made the opposite call and built the storyline directly into the show. The surrogacy arc, in which Phoebe carries her brother's triplets, became one of the most celebrated plots, specifically because a real pregnancy gave the writers something they chose to use rather than hide. Before the show premiered, director James Burrows gathered all 6 cast members and took them to Las Vegas, telling them to enjoy their anonymity while it lasted because their lives were about to change in ways that couldn't be undone. Within weeks of the September 22, 1994 premiere, they were among the most recognized faces in America. David Schwimmer later described the explosion of fame as something that damaged his fundamental approach to acting. His entire process had depended on observing strangers honestly in public, which became impossible overnight. The Monica and Chandler relationship wasn't designed, it was discovered. At the end of season 4, filming the London episodes, the writers put the 2 characters together as a single comedic beat and nothing more. When the scene played before the live London studio audience, the reaction ran so long that editors had to reduce it to roughly 1/3 its actual length just to keep the episode inside its running time. Co-creator David Crane and the creative team recognized that what they'd written as a throwaway moment had revealed something the scripts hadn't planned for. A relationship that ran for 6 seasons, came out of a crowd in London that simply refused to stop. James Michael Tyler played Gunther across all 236 episodes and never received main cast credit. He began as a completely wordless background extra, and the reason the production kept calling him back was practical. He actually knew how to operate an espresso machine, having worked at a real coffee shop. Lines were written for him gradually, then a distinct personality, then a decade of quietly unrequited love for Rachel. In the series finale, Gunther told Rachel he loved her, and she told him she loved him too, in the way you love someone who was never going to be yours. Tyler disclosed a prostate cancer diagnosis in 2021 and passed away on October 24th of that year. Before every single episode across all 10 seasons, the 6 cast members would huddle together backstage, and nobody outside that circle ever knew what passed between them. After filming wrapped, many would stay on the soundstage and order pizza, sitting together in a building full of fake New York. Jennifer Aniston became godmother to Courtney Cox's daughter. The friendship was real. The night before the final taping, the 6 had dinner together at Aniston's home. After the wrap party, where Sheryl Crow and the Rembrandts performed for 1,000 guests, the 6 had privately agreed to do one more thing nobody else knew about. They reenacted the very first scene from the pilot. No announcement, no warning. Crane described the reaction as complete and total shock. The circle closed. This show was nearly called Insomnia Cafe. It nearly had a 7th character who was a police officer. It nearly built its entire romantic foundation on Joey and Monica. It nearly starred John Cryer, Vince Vaughn, Janine Goff, and Eric McCormack in roles we now associate entirely with other people. A customs delay, a pilot about alien luggage, a woman who asked to read the wrong character, a man who fought through seasons he would never remember, and a live audience in London that wouldn't stop reacting. All of it had to land exactly where it did. The next time you sit down with this show, hold all of that in mind.